This is Audible.
Dr. Carlson, Chairman Abrams, members of the committee, Mr. Grandegari, the public, I'd like to introduce you to Dr. Russell Carlson. Dr. Carlson, would you please briefly introduce yourself and talk about your background and why that background qualifies you to talk about the science standards today? Thank you.
I am currently a professor of biochemistry and molecular biology at the University of Georgia. Also technical director of the Complex Carbohydrate Research Center at the same institution and adjunct professor of microbiology. Although I'm in Kansas, I hope you won't hold it against me that I received my doctoral work at the University of Colorado in Boulder, since it's a rival state. Before that, I received a Bachelor of Arts degree, actually, at North Park College at Chicago, Illinois, and with a major in chemistry and a minor in mathematics. I am currently. That's my educational background. Did you want me to explain more about? Yeah,
go ahead. Now, what are you doing now?
Okay, my area of research is understanding the molecular basis of how bacteria infect animal and plant cells, and the projects involve molecules that are compose the cell wall of the bacteria. Not surprisingly, since I'm at the Carbohydrate Research Center, they are carbohydrates in nature, and these molecules are involved in determining whether a bacterium can be virulent or not. And so we work on quite a variety of projects in collaboration with other investigators. These projects include pathogens such as Neisseria meningitidis, which is a causal agent of bacterial meningitis, Haemophilus influenza, Pseudomonas aeruginosa, which is an Pseudomonas aeruginosa, which is an opportunistic pathogen. We also have currently projects on Bacillus anthracis, which is the causal agent of anthrax, and have done some work on another bioterrorism pathogen called Brucella abortus, which is a causal agent of a disease called brucellosis. And so those are some of the projects we've been working on. We want to understand the molecular basis for how these bacteria are virulent in order to provide basic information that would hopefully lead to therapeutic treatments, diagnostics, and vaccines. Carbohydrates are already used from bacterial pathogens as vaccines, so I'm sure some of your children have already been vaccinated with carbohydrate-based vaccines.
Dr. Carlson, are you also a professor at University of Georgia?
Yes, that's.
And you're heading up a research lab there.
Yes.
And I believe you just described some of the activities of that lab. Is that right?
Yeah. Well, all the activities that we have are involved in all these different projects, and I currently have. This, of course, requires a lot of people. So I have 4 postdoctoral associates working in the lab, 3 graduate students, 2 technicians, several undergraduate students, and currently I have really privileged to have a visiting professor from the University of Tübingen in Germany working with me on the couple of the projects. Of course, this requires a lot of money to do all of this work, and biochemical research is not cheap. It's not inexpensive to do. It's an expensive process, and so over the years, all of it has had to obtain funding from the National Science Foundation, the National Institutes of Health, the U.S. Department of Agriculture, and the Department of Energy. And because of all of my students have been very hard workers and very productive, and my postdoctoral research associates over the years, we've hopefully hopefully made some contributions to the peer review literature by publishing, I don't know, somewhere around 130 articles, I think.
Just in general total, about what is the amount of grants and funding that you've received to promote your work?
Over the
years.
Approximately $7 million.
To what extent does the theory of evolution impact the kind of work you're doing and in the area of operational science?
Well, as I say, mostly what we're working on is, bacteria that exist today and determining how these molecules infect cells. And so we make perturbations in the organisms by mutating specific genes and seeing what the effect is on the carbohydrate structure, what the effect is on the virulence mechanism. And these are things that can be done in the laboratory. We can verify in the laboratory where the mutation is, what the structural defect is. We can look with electron microscopy what the effect on virulence is. So these are all things that are observable in present time. And so in this sense, I don't think that the evolutionary theory really enters into this type of day-to-day work.
Do you need to have a deep understanding of evolutionary biology to conduct that work?
No.
There has been a claim made that, and I believe you've reviewed the proposed changes to the Kansas standards that are reflected in the minority report. Is that correct?
Yes, I reviewed the changes that were proposed.
Okay. And the argument has been made that if Kansas were to embrace those changes, it would drive bioscience out of the state. Would you mind commenting on that?
Well, I don't think that I don't see how that could be the case. But to me, it just seemed like more of basically a fear tactic. So others have testified here too. I just don't agree that is a likely outcome.
Okay. Would you agree that there is a scientific controversy over the theory of evolution, both chemical and biological?
Yeah, I do agree. I think that the level of controversy or consensus, if you will, about evolution, as we've seen in both all day yesterday and today. So this is probably for you that are here redundant, but there's a lot of consensus with regard to natural selection accounting for diversity of life within certain boundaries. For example, within variation within species, or what has been referred to here in testimony by others as microevolution. There is less consensus with regard to natural selection accounting for the broader diversity, such as plants, fungi, and animals all being derived from some common ancestor, and ultimately all life's diversity being derived from some ancestral prokaryote. The consensus perhaps continues to decrease, as you've seen from just the previous testimony, and controversy increase around the idea that biological information or the genetic code or the molecules necessary for life could arise from random collisions of molecules in some primordial soup. So the extent of consensus or controversy kind of depends on what aspect of evolution that you're talking about.
Do you think the minority report identifies in the evolution benchmark, perhaps not all, but some of the key controversial issues that students should be aware of?
I'm not sure what. Can you be more specific on?
One is the controversy regarding whether evolution can be extrapolated to macroevolution, for example?
Well, I think it would be really nice for the students just to know that in their understanding of evolution, that macroevolution is an extrapolation of microevolution. That would be good for them to know. I think that it's perhaps that's one thing that's not taught very clearly, and so just distinguishing between the two and having the students to understand that macroevolution is an inference is something that is inferred from microevolutionary changes would be a really important aspect.
I would like you to turn your attention to a provision in the minority report regarding the definition of science. The minority report proposed to substitute the current definition, which is science is human activity of seeking natural explanations for what we observe in the world around us, to a definition that science is a systematic method of continuing investigation and so forth that's shown on the screen. Would you care to comment on that?
Yeah, I support this proposed revision to the definition of science. An essential principle of science is that every effect has a cause, and science is in the search for those causes. And that search includes origin of life and diversity, and this is a historical science question. These kind of questions are historical science questions and involve searching for causes of past events that are singular, that just happened one time, and these kinds of things cannot be investigated in a laboratory sense of being able to reproduce these types of events in the laboratory. But also, science includes searching for causes of present effects, which is like how a bacterium is infective or virulent. This can be investigated in the laboratory, and this is often referred to as operational science. And in the search, science, which includes both of these historical and operational aspects, should be driven by objective observation of the facts and seek the most accurate explanation based on, I believe, the criteria that are stated in the revision, which is hypothesis testing, measurement, experimentation, logical argument, and theory building. In this effort, and in particular with origin science, explanations of the evidence have metaphysical implications, and it's really inappropriate to restrict explanations to those that only support one metaphysical position, which is materialistic naturalism, and that's a position that nature is all there is. Science should be in a search for truth, and scientists, teachers, and students should be able to follow the evidence wherever it leads. It's not, in my opinion, appropriate to force all evidence into a 150-year-old Darwinian box. We need both teachers and students that are able to critically evaluate evolutionary theory and think outside the box. With regard, do you want me to? Okay, that's with regard to
as you move down through the introduction section, there's another provision that says, according to many scientists, the core claim of evolutionary theory is that the apparent design of living systems is an illusion. Do you agree with that? That a core claim of evolutionary theory is that apparent design, like the apparent design of the eye, is not objectively real, that is just an illusion?
I don't know what all evolutionary scientists say about that, but that has been the claim of some very prominent ones. Yes.
Would you also agree that there are scientists that disagree that design is not objective, that there is no evidence to suggest the contrary?
Yes, other scientists disagree with that.
and essentially the other scientists are scientists that are pursuing the theory of intelligent design?
Yes. I actually had an interesting. We have a big kind of a discussion listserv, and this has been a topic on it at our university. And I have some, as has been mentioned by. I'm not sure how to pronounce your name.
You're gonna hear it.
There are scientists with many different religious views that can do science very well, and so I have some good colleagues that are what I would call theistic evolutionists, and so there was a big discussion and pros and cons of this type of aspect, and well, finally, their position was that well, natural selection occurs is actually guided, but we just can't detect it. And so I pointed out to them that it seems to me that their position was different from these are people who have faith, but they're theistic evolutionists. So atheistic evolutionists, some of the notable ones have said that we have to keep looking at, when we look at nature, we have to keep reminding ourselves that design is an illusion. And theistic evolutionists, from what I was getting on the listserv, apparently have to look at nature and they see design, but they see randomness, but they have to believe that randomness is an illusion, that it's guided. So, so there is these debates that are going on.
Well, the standards, the minority report suggests that the debate about design or no design not be included in the standards themselves, but that teachers should not be prohibited from teaching about the scientific disagreement. Do you agree with that?
Yes.
Would you want to comment on that at all?
Well, I think it's inappropriate for, I think, like I said, if we want to search for, we want students to be able to objectively follow evidence where it leads, then even by those who don't agree with design, they see apparent design, the students should be able to, and the teachers should be able to discuss this possibility, and it should not, discussion of it should not be prohibited.
Page 7 of the minority report discusses the causes of a number of events with respect to which science does not have all the answers. It says, although science proposes theories to explain changes, the actual cause of many changes are currently unknown. For example, the origin of the universe, the origin of fundamental laws, the origin of life and the genetic code, the origin of major body plans during the Cambrian explosion. Is that, in your opinion, an accurate statement?
Yes, I think it's an accurate statement. I think that's been demonstrated by other witnesses here before this committee.
This is just a part of the introduction, and it's directed primarily to teachers. Do you think this is appropriate advice for teachers to keep in mind?
Yes, I think it is, and I think this is something that students are interested in. It really describes some of the things that are most essential, really essential questions that science is seeking to answer, and they need to be informed about them. I think that, as I previously stated, answers to some of these questions do have profound metaphysical implications, and they need to be encouraged to or at least permitted to think about those implications.
On page 12, there's a proposed change in additional specificity 4C. and the change relates to a sentence that says that students should be able to evaluate personal preconceptions and biases with respect to his or her conclusions. And the minority has stricken the word personal because they believe that that word is essentially limited the analysis of bias and preconception that might affect explanation. Specifically, they were worried that that would not direct the student to attempt to understand institutional biases that might inhere in the institutions. Do you think that's an appropriate change, and would you care to comment on it?
Yeah, I think certainly personal preconceptions should be considered, but those aren't the only ones. And so I think it's appropriate to cross out personal and in order to expand that. So scientific reasoning always involves some point of view or preconception. So personal bias should be one of those. And institutional bias should also be one. However, also preconceptions can be the result of accepted dogmas that may not be supported by new facts. So all of these types of things should be considered.
Do you believe peer-reviewed science journals ever employ an institutional bias?
Well, yeah. I peer review stuff all the time. I'm part of the, I'm on the editorial board of a journal, so I'm involved heavily in this and also peer reviewing things for NIH proposals. And I will say that most of I think it depends on what area of work you're.
Well, a peer-reviewed journal, biology journal or evolutionary biology journal, accept a paper that postulates the possibility of design?
Yeah, I'm not involved too much in those, peer reviewing those types of research articles or proposals in that area. I'm not sure about the ones that I do, but I just the most recent one that I heard of in this area is the episode with Steve Meyer's article on biological information, which was peer reviewed for, I think it's the Washington Biological Society, and by the normal peer review process, and discussed the idea of design. And from that, there was a lot of outcry, and the editor of the journal was attacked because of this, and his position one of his positions at the Smithsonian Institute, I believe, was he was forced to resign from that. I'm not sure of all the details. So,
have you read that article?
I've read most of it, not a whole lot.
What do you think? I mean, was a criticism of it justified?
Well, no one really criticized the content of the article. They were criticizing the fact that it was published in a peer review journal. And so, there's a saying that by a famous evolutionary biologist, Dobzhansky, that he quoted that nothing in biology makes sense except in the light of evolution. And when you use that as a filter for science articles that are reviewed, then the peer review process becomes converted into a peer pressure process, and this is unfortunate.
Thank you so much. Maybe one last question. In general, what is your assessment of the Minority Report?
Well, my overall assessment is that they improve the original document, since they encourage a more objective presentation of origin science. I believe that if a scientist, regardless of his or her view on origins, we're really able to read the standards as modified by the minority without prior knowledge of this current debate, that he or she would have very little problem readily endorsing them.
Thank you so much, Dr. Carlson. We have copies of his testimony, and that has just arrived here in the room. We'll pass those, distribute those shortly, along with copies of Dr. Peltzer's testimony.
Sir, I have a few questions that I need to ask you for the record. First of all, I'd like to ask you, sir, what your opinion is as to what the age of the Earth is.
Well, I agree with the previous witness here. I don't work in that area, but I don't have any problem with the idea that it's 4.5 billion years old or whatever.
Do you accept the general principle of common descent, which is that all of life is biologically related back to the beginning of life?
No. I believe that, as I said with the term evolution, I think common descent is also one where there's no problem in
Sir, my question was whether you agree.
I'm
I'm just asking you whether you agree or not. Let me repeat the question. I'm not interested in an explanation.
Well,
do you
okay.
accept? Just please listen to me.
I'm glad
this is
that's
a
on the
yes
record.
or no question.
Yeah.
Do you accept the general principle of common descent that all of life is biologically related back to the beginning of life? Yes or no?
No.
Do you accept that human beings are related by common descent to pre-hominid ancestors? Yes or no?
I don't accept that as a fact.
I did not hear you.
I don't accept that as being scientifically proven fact. No.
If that is not acceptable to you, what alternative explanation do you propose for how the human species came into existence?
I don't have an alternative position on that. That's not my area of research.
So would it be fair to say that you do not agree with evolutionary theory as far as the common descent principles for the human species, but you do not have an answer as to how it happened?
I do not have a scientific answer as to how it happened, no.
Is it your opinion that it happened as a result of intelligent design?
I believe that design is a possible explanation that should be investigated. Yeah.
But you are not suggesting that intelligent design is the answer.
Well, scientifically, I don't think that's been determined yet. No, but I think it should be one that's considered.
Is there, in draft 2, any discussion about the origin of life?
Well, I've just read I haven't read the entire draft.
They brought you here to testify about the standards for science education for our children, and you did not read it. Is that correct?
I haven't read the whole thing. I've read the portions I was asked to give testimony.
So you have, who told you selectively what to read?
Nobody told me anything. It was sent to me.
Who sent to you only selective pieces of draft 2 and the minority? Strike that. Were you sent the minority report in toto?
No.
Were you sent?
Wait, the minority report? Let me see. I believe I do have the minority report.
You were sent the minority report in toto, but you were only sent selective pieces of the majority report, correct?
Well, actually, I don't have a copy of what I actually received, so I can't answer that question.
But one way or the other, you were instructed to be familiar with only a portion, correct?
They asked me for expert testimony on various aspects of the changes that they were suggesting to see whether these were reasonable changes. And so that's what I'm doing.
Is there consensus in the scientific community about how life began?
No.
You say that there are many theories of the origins of life. Would you be in agreement with me that it would be more appropriate to say hypotheses of the origin of life exist, since there's no consensus?
That there are
Hypotheses as to the
a
origin
number
of
of
life.
hypotheses as to yeah, I guess I would have no problem with that.
Is there anything, and I don't know if you can testify to this since you have not read the entire draft, but has anyone told you whether or not there's anything in draft 2 that would prevent a teacher from discussing the issues that you and others might bring up about the origins of life?
Well, in the portions I've read, there's nothing that would prevent teachers from doing it, but I think that it needs to do more than just not prevent teachers from discussing these issues. Teachers should be actually encouraged to discuss ideas.
I beg your pardon, sir.
Teachers should be there should be something in the changes that allow teachers to discuss that.
Isn't it in fact the truth that the majority standards do encourage teachers to discuss openly evolution and questions raised by children?
Well, I would say not. If in the majority, if science is seeking natural explanations only, and also that scientific knowledge is defined only in terms of matter and energy and forces, no, they're not.
Do you have a problem with science attempting to find natural answers to the world around us?
Absolutely not.
Is it your suggestion that science should include intelligent design as a quest for truth?
I think it should be considered.
Is intelligent design a philosophy?
Is it a philosophy? Well, I think design it's a hypothesis.
A hypothesis that has someone as a designer, correct?
Well, the hypothesis is intelligent design is that there is design.
And the design, by definition, requires a designer, correct?
Yes.
And who is that designer, in your opinion?
Scientifically, I don't know.
And if you don't know who the designer is, and if by definition it is a philosophical approach, why would you suggest that it should have any place in science?
Well, design is something that can be detected and looked for.
Design can be detected, and we would all agree that things may have a functional design. For example, how our planetary system is set up, but it's different from observation to suggest what the design is, to have an opinion that it must be a supernatural design, correct?
Well, I don't think anyone is positing an identity of whether the designer would be supernatural or not supernatural.
Are you suggesting in intelligent design that the designer was a human being?
No, I'm just saying that we cannot scientifically determine the identity of the designer.
We may not be able to determine the identity, but in your opinion, that identity is that of God, correct? In your opinion, the intelligent designer is God, correct?
Well, yeah, in my view, I would suppose I would agree with that.
And would you not agree with me that for the interest of science, science should remain neutral as it relates to religion?
Oh, I agree, but I don't think
And
that...
would you not agree with me that introducing intelligent design into the curriculum, by definition, places an issue of faith when we cannot come up with a natural answer?
No, I don't agree with that. Design is neutral.
How can design be neutral if you just told me the designer is God?
I said that was my. I didn't say that we should discuss with children in the science class the identity of the designer.
So what do? We tell them it's a designer, but we disguise from them the fact that those who are suggesting intelligent design to be taught believe is God? Do we keep that in secret from them as a mystery?
Well, right now, what is encouraged is that when children ask a question, about the naturalistic response, they're told to go talk to their mom and dad or their parents or whatever.
Or their pastor?
Or their pastor.
And
yeah.
You believe that is inappropriate?
No, I believe that the neutral position would be to allow a discussion of the evidentiary basis for design.
And is there anything in the standards, to your knowledge? Then again, you have not read the standards. Let me suggest this to you. Has anyone told you that the standards would deny a Kansas teacher who is asked a question about intelligent design by a student to be able to discuss it?
No, I don't think so, but I think, on the contrary, I think design should be one of the explanations that are brought forth.
An explanation of what?
An explanation of a possible explanation of things like biological information, which we cannot explain.
So you suggest that if we don't have the ability at this moment in time to understand a natural process, that we should tell our students it must therefore be supernatural?
No, I'm saying we should open it up to allow students to discuss whether design is real or illusionary.
Isn't that a philosophical question, sir? Doesn't that get involved with faith and religion? And did you not agree with me a moment ago that science should be neutral?
Well, I think detecting design is neutral. I think there are objective criteria by which we can detect design.
We're not talking about detecting design. We're talking about an explanation for design.
Well, I think
my time is up.
Yeah.
Dr. Carlson, I realize how busy you are and how your research is very important to you, and I thank you very much for being here with your expert testimony.
You're welcome.
And I will confess to you that I'm on this committee and I'm very interested in science, but I have not read the second draft word for word either. And since you don't have it, please don't feel bad that you haven't read it. And I do see some things in the introduction that I feel are slanted toward naturalistic explanations. So please don't feel bad that you haven't gotten to read the whole thing, because I have not read it word for word myself. So what I do want to ask you a little bit about is, how can design then be introduced into the classroom and not lead toward what Mr. Pedro was saying might lead to an intelligent, identifying an intelligent cause?
Well, I think there are objective criteria for design, and those can be discussed in the classroom. Like I said, there's metaphysical implications for if you detect design. There's metaphysical implications for that, which is what was brought out here: the identity of the designer, where did it come from, all those kinds of things. And I'm not sure that can be discussed in the science classroom. It's perhaps at that point where there should be referral, in order to be neutral, to a pastor or a rabbi or parents or mullah or whoever. Yeah.
But just allowing for this means of exploration, looking at
because
design
I
allows
think
for more
design,
information.
I think being able to apply the mathematical criteria for what detecting design to a biological system is something that can be done. And so that is a neutral way of doing it.
Dr. Carlson,
Yes.
we heard yesterday that evolution is a slippery word. Would you agree with that statement?
Well, yes, particularly now, I do.
Repeat that, please.
Particularly after the, yes, it is. I agree with.
You talked earlier about the different methods that evolution have in science and their understanding and their agreement. Why does the word have such different meanings?
Well, I think it has different. Some of the reasons it have different meanings is because of what we discussed earlier is preconceptions and bias. But I think the other reason is that is based on evidence. You know, I mean, there's strong evidence for what we refer to as microevolutionary changes, and the evidence is not as strong to support macroevolutionary changes as Jonathan Wells presented to you yesterday, and then also yesterday and today you saw about the idea of chemical evolution and have serious problems, and so I think the slipperiness of it comes that when you just use the word evolution, for some people it means all the way from chemicals in a primordial soup to human beings. For other people it means the micro evolutionary changes. So when you just use the term evolution, then without a clear definition, if I'm talking to someone in the audience and we're saying, do you believe in evolution, we have to first each have an understanding of what evolution means to me. He needs to know what evolution means to me. I need to know what evolution means to him.
Why not try to clarify what is actually meant?
2 minutes remaining.
Let me rephrase. Why in science is the word, do you believe in evolution, or those types of comments, or you don't believe in evolution, why not be more specific, saying, do you believe in mutations? Do you believe in biological or abiogenesis or chemical evolution, or be much more specific?
Well, I think that would solve some of the problem of the slipperiness of the word if we were being more precise. Yes.
Earlier you used the word dogma. Would you agree or disagree that evolution is taught as a dogma in many classrooms?
I would. Well, I'm not a high school teacher, but I would tend to agree with that. But I don't have a lot of,
How about in college?
Yes.
And when I said evolution, to be specific, I was not talking about mutations. I was talking about biological evolution. Is that what you would agree to?
Yes, and even within that, I would say it would be the standard Darwinian or neo-Darwinian model.
Thank you very much.
Dr. Abrams, members of the committee, Mr. Reganagary, I'd like to introduce to you Dr. John Sanford. Dr. Sanford, could you tell us a bit about your background and how that qualifies you to testify today?
Okay, I'm glad to be here. My name is John Sanford. Just to explain how I got to be here, Dr. John Calvert asked me to testify for you, and I'm not coming here as an advocate. I'm not here really to write your guidelines for you, but if you have questions for me, I'm happy to answer them. So I've not studied all the drafts, but I am simply a resource for you, and I've taken 3 days out of my life to donate to this discussion. I hope I can answer your questions adequately. My background is I have training in the area of plant breeding and plant genetics. My PhD is from the University of Wisconsin. I've been a Cornell professor for 25 years. When I was at Cornell, I did a very diverse range of research. I published on many different topics. I have 70 publications in scientific journals, over 25 patents. My main claim to fame is that I am the primary inventor of the gene gun technology, which has been used extensively in plant genetic engineering. So when the gene gun technology was developed, I was very blessed in able to get a lot of revenue from that. It was a very financially rewarding invention, which eventually let me leave Cornell. So right now I'm a courtesy professor at Cornell with an office there, but I'm not on the paid faculty, and I'm presently in the process of writing books. So that's my background. Just one more comment in terms of my qualifications to discuss this is most of my career I've been an atheistic evolutionist. Later in life I became a theistic evolutionist, and later became a biblical Christian, and so I'm sure as the prosecutor will be asking me, I do have a Christian perspective.
Dr. Sanford, when did you switch from atheism to a Christian worldview?
It was about 20 years ago.
And then...
This is irrelevant to the standards. I don't think it does any good to get involved in this.
The rules do not permit this type of interruption.
There's got to be some relevance.
Would you please answer?
Time to allow to do as he wants to do.
You may answer the question.
20 years.
20 years ago. And
Yes.
so, and I think you said that you were a theistic evolutionist for a period of time after that. Why was that?
I had been trained in evolution, and everything I'd ever thought was in terms of evolution. For me, it was as clear as that the world is round. It's just uncontestable. But in retrospect, I had not critically assessed much of what I believed. I believed it based upon authority, without critical assessment.
So, would it be fair to say that while you were an atheist, you didn't find any personal reason to critically analyze the theory or to challenge it?
Yes. Well, as an atheist, there's no alternative hypothesis, because if no one, and there's no designer and no creator, then you have to believe that the universe created itself.
Okay. So, 20 years ago, you became a Christian, and then at some subsequent time, let me ask you this, do you use evolutionary biology in your operational science?
I don't use it, and when I was an evolutionist, I would have argued that evolutionary theory is critical to being a good scientist. I actually realized that some of my best science has been done since that time. I've also realized that historically all the founding fathers of science were non-evolutionists, and many of them were anti-evolutionists. So I realized that good science is not in any way conditional upon accepting the evolutionary theory.
Is it fair to say then that, you switched from Christianity, from atheism to Christianity 20 years ago, and then there was a period of time that you were, I think you described a theistic evolutionist. Is that correct?
Yes.
And then, during that period of time, did you have any cause or reason to, or did you challenge or critically analyze evolutionary theory?
I did not generally question the doctrines that I had been taught. They were like foundational beliefs, and I did not generally question them.
Okay. And then at some point in time, something caused you to begin to question it.
So I had friends who basically said, have you looked at the other side? And I said, what other side? I had been at Cornell at that point 20 years, and I really did not know that there was a legitimate position which could contest evolutionary assumptions.
And so then you began to look at it critically.
I began to look at it critically, and for several years I was intrigued by alternative explanations for many different things. And so this was a time of great intellectual excitement for me. So looking at alternatives to evolution, I did not find mentally deadening, but rather incredibly stimulating. And I basically went back and reassessed everything I ever knew.
What is the gene gun?
The gene gun is a process and apparatus for delivering DNA into cells and tissues. And it's been used for genetic engineering plants and for experimentation in medical science.
I want to I just lost my file. Dr. Sanford, we have discussed in the proceedings today the definition of evolution that's contained in the proposed science standards. And the minority report would substitute the definition science is the human activity of seeking natural explanations for what we observe in the world around us for a more objective definition. The substituted definition, in your view, does that import methodological naturalism? And if so, would you please explain your answer?
Okay. The definition of science is tricky business, and it requires a lot of wordsmithing. I can appreciate the difficulty of coming up with a definition that's acceptable to everyone. I personally believe that the minority report's definition is a slight improvement over the other because it does define science somewhat more broadly. For example, the first definition talks about only studying the physical or material world. But there are things that we can study that are not material. For example, information is a non-material entity, and as a geneticist, I'm very interested in information. And even though it is often carried through material substances like a CD disc or a tape or a piece of paper, it itself is a non-material entity. And so I have a slight preference for the minority's definition of science.
I cut you off.
Okay. In terms of methodological naturalism or methodological materialism, I do believe that methodological implies science and naturalism implies philosophy. So one can, in fact, use the methodology of science to study things without a materialistic or naturalistic philosophy behind it.
Do you believe that the definition of the minority report, which limits explanation to just natural phenomena, describes science too narrowly, and does that impact, in your view, the issue of religion?
I think that in the case that we're discussing, which is the issue of origins, it isn't a reasonable pre-assumption that everything occurred strictly by natural law. In fact, that is the very question, was in the beginning, did everything arise from natural law or was there a designer? That shouldn't be a premise, it should be the question. In other words, we will use science to examine evidence for or against a designed versus a randomly occurring universe.
You've mentioned operational science and historical science in your testimony, and I want to direct your attention to one proposed change in the standards that relates to the issue of historical science. In this particular indicator, the minority, this is relating to earth and space science. And the proposed indicator would have students understand how to test an historical hypothesis about the cause of a remote past event by formulating competing hypotheses and then describing the kinds of data that would support one and refute the other. Mm-hmm. I think we had a discussion a while back, and you made the comment that you did not realize that there was a distinction between historical and experimental science until a few years ago. And so I would like you to comment upon that as well as this indicator, and the importance for students to understand the distinction.
Okay. I think that what's proposed is excellent because developing alternative hypotheses and then defining experiments to discriminate between which hypotheses are stronger than others is critical to scientific method and critical to critical thinking. So I think it's an excellent addition to the curriculum. I entirely support it. And I also support the idea of getting students to recognize the distinction between operational science and historical science. And for myself, as you point out, I often failed to make that distinction even as a Cornell scientist, and I know that many of my colleagues have often failed to make that distinction. If you pick up the journal Science and go through it, you'll see that there are some publications which are easily verifiable by any laboratory in the world. That's operational science. There are other publications which are speaking about non-reproducible events in the distant past, which really is historical science. And it's very important to distinguish them for this reason. Operational science must be reproducible. It's incredibly important. It's not science if someone else on the other side of the world can't reproduce your experiment. But historical science is not reproducible. Let me give you a quick illustration. It's often said that Josephine poisoned Bonaparte and Napoleon. Okay? That's historical science. And they say, look, we have scientific proof that she did it because we found arsenic in the bones of the person who's buried in Napoleon's grave. But I'd like to distinguish for you what part of that is operational science and what part is historical science. If we test for arsenic in those bones, you can send it out to 20 different laboratories around the world, and they'll all give you roughly agreement about how much arsenic is in those bones. That's operational science, and it's reproducible. Everybody can agree to it. But there's also historical science. Given the importance and the political intrigue associated with Napoleon, was it Napoleon buried in Napoleon's grave? That's an inference. Was he exposed to arsenic by accident or on purpose? That's an inference. If he was exposed to Napoleon on purpose, was it his wife or someone else or himself? So there's a great deal of inference. So although it's science to say we found arsenic in the bones in the grave of Napoleon, that's operational science. Historical science is Napoleon poisoned her husband. Historical science says that Josephine poisoned her husband. It's incredibly important to distinguish these two things. I'm seeing a lot of novels being published today by evolutionary scientists where they take it the next step. If you were a novelist and you wrote about the story of how Josephine poisoned her husband, that's called historical fiction. The problem is historical science can easily blur into historical fiction because there's no accountability. It's largely speculation.
Would you describe evolutionary biology as in large parts an historical science?
It is entirely a historical science. So this is why the distinction is so important. A lot of people say if you don't agree with the current form of historical science in terms of evolution, you are a threat to science at large. But you're not. Operational science is not being challenged. The space shuttle, modern medicine, modern agriculture, telecommunications, that's all operational science. It is not influenced by this discussion of human origins. Everyone is supportive of that type of science. Historical science becomes more